This is the Bound Report for October 8th, 2025. The Soros family has been strangling the United States of America for over 30 years. Time to end it. Following the money and seditious activities into the financial backing of left-wing activist groups like Antifa and the Democratic Socialists of America leads anyone remotely interested into a dark world of political vipers and New World Order zealots. And leading the charge publicly, everybody's favorite New World Order collaborator, billionaire, global sovereignty eater, philanthropist, poser George Soros and his sons Alex and Jonathan have orchestrated political unrest in the United States through funding from the Open Society Foundation since the mid-1990s, a network that has disbursed billions to progressive causes, including human rights, criminal justice reform, and democratic initiatives.
They need to finish George Soros. That man and his ideas and his foundations are responsible for the destruction of the West. And someone has to now, he has to pay for it.
Why has George Soros done so much to try to dismantle?
For his worldview, for the globalist plan, they want to destroy the West. They don't want America to be a superpower. They want to bring America down. They want China to be the superpower. And America nearly were losing all of these battles until you elected Trump.
With Antifa and with these domestic terrorist groups in the United States now, we always hear the word George Soros. What involvement does he really have in what's going on? And
he pulls the strings in all of it. And even if he dies, he's sorted out so that his corporations and his movement and all of the policies and all of the where he wants his agendas will continue. The money will just continue. Now, everything. So the groups in our country that are pro-open borders and their job is to attack anyone who exercises their free speech, to demonise them, to contact their HR companies. There's a group called Hope Not Hate in the UK, George Soros funded. All of the groups which are open borders, mass, and to attack a free speech and to create an atmosphere of fear where people are scared to talk, George Soros. All of it. I can't believe he hasn't been taken down by the American government. The attacks on Elon Musk's businesses, the attacks against Tesla, it will be all coming, power, money, organised. Antifa, all of it.
Do these people...
They're all funded. All these demonstrations, they're funded. Like the demonstration against us. Now, they're funded through the UK from the unions. We had our demonstration, you saw millions of people. The opposition was 5,000 people. All the coaches were free. Everything was paid for them. Everything was paid for. And they could only get 5,000 people. But yeah, George Soros needs taken down. George Soros is the enemy of freedom, the enemy of Christianity, and the enemy of the West.
In an August 27, 2025 Truth Social post, Trump demanded RICO charges against the Soroses, claiming their support for violent protests constituted organized crime. He reiterated this in a September 12th Fox News interview, vowing a racketeering probe into the Open Society Foundation for real agitation beyond mere demonstrations.
Well, the problem is on the left. If you look at the problem is on the left. It's not on the right, like some people like to say on the right. The problem we have is on the left. And when you look at the agitators, you look at the scum that speaks so badly of our country, the American flag burnings all over the place, that's the left, that's not the right.
Investigating.
We'll see. We'll be announcing. They're already under investigation. They're already under major investigation. A lot of the people that you would traditionally say are on the left.
They're
already under investigation.
But they have professional agitators. They're professional.
They're paid.
I had one the other night. I went into a restaurant and this woman stood up. I looked at her immediately. She had money. She wasn't serious. They get paid for it. They're professional from Soros and other people. And we're going to look into Soros because I think it's a RICO case against him and other people. Because this is more than like protests. This is real agitation. This is riots on the street. And we're going to look into that.
George Soros, the shadowy billionaire puppet master, has been funneling his fortune into the heart of American chaos, starting his dark crusade in the 1980s with so-called philanthropy that eventually morphed into tearing down the nation's moral and legal fabric, the prime example of everything we were warned about by the founders. Through his Open Society Foundations, formalized in 1993, he's pumped billions, $32 billion globally by some counts, into radical groups pushing everything from open borders to defunding the police, all under the guise of human rights and racial equity. By the mid-90s, his U.S. operations were in full swing, bankrolling outfits like the Project on Death in America and anti-law enforcement initiatives, laying the groundwork for what many with eyes to see and ears to hear surmised as a deliberate assault on American sovereignty. Decades later,
according to George Soros' own files from his Open Society Foundations, so myself, my colleagues at Capital Research Center, basically went through as many grants of his, as many funding streams as we could find, and here's the smoking guns that we believe that President Trump, if he's informed of it, can use to go after Soros's network of hate in various ways. We traced over $80 million going from the Open Society Foundations to at least 54 groups engaged in crime and domestic terrorism on U.S. soil, or that are pro-terrorism, endorsing things like the October 7th attacks, or are associated with foreign terrorist organizations or explicitly pro-terror groups. And this is according to his own files, so it's rock solid. And over all of that amount, over 23 million went to at least 7 groups that are doing things that meet the FBI's definition of domestic terrorism, including rioting and things like that.
Can you be specific, more specific than this?
Absolutely. I'm happy to. So the Center for Third World Organizing, for example, is an organization that has a hub that fused together several really extreme organizations. We found $400,000 going to them, and they openly boast of the fact that they threw down during the uprisings in Minnesota, obviously referring to the rioting, and boasting of how many thousands of people they helped train. A lot of these groups have created what they'll call like a protest guide or an activism toolkit, and it sounds innocuous. Then you open it up and you'll see support for Hamas in it, but then they'll sometimes slyly say, for more information, go to these hyperlinks. And you go to the hyperlinks, and there'll be guides recommending things like property destruction, violence, false IDs, how to obstruct justice, all of these things, and they know darn well what they're doing. They don't put that there by accident. Some of the more careful ones will just direct their readership to anarchist websites with all that material, knowing that they'll see it when it's there. And so, yeah, I mean, it's really stunning. And some of these groups are coalitions. So when I say 54 groups, just one of those might have 300 entities in that one. So it's actually, the real number is actually much higher.
And I want to echo the Secretary's comments on Scott Bessent, who's allowing us to map out these networks through their financial criminal activities, which has been going on for decades. And I would like to remind the American public, they built this diseased temple of corruption over decades. And in 8 short months, Mr. President, you have crippled their foundation because of your leadership here, because of the interagency, because of people like Deputy Attorney General Blanche, and because of Attorney General Pam Bondi's fearless leadership to go after criminals wherever they are. They will not be able to hide. They were able to hide and conspire with prior administrations, and we are exposing their corruption from within. And we will go to every single city in this country under Operation Summer Heat and the other operations we are doing at the FBI to bring these criminals to justice. We will arrest every single one of them from whatever perch you sit in, private or public, no matter how your goal or your ambition is. It will be crushed by the Constitution because the American people deserve law and order, and that's what we're going to give you.
In 2024 alone, his Open Society Foundation dumped $242 million into U.S. causes, propping up the likes of Antifa and other agitators who've turned our cities into hellish battlegrounds. Paid protesters arriving on all-expense-paid excursions, including buses and pre-made signs, have now made ICE and the National Guard the boogeymen, all while Soros smirks from his ivory tower, untouchable, or so he thinks. And it's not just George pulling the strings. His offspring are deep in the game too, with Jonathan Soros, the eldest son, wielding his J. Darius Capital as a slush fund for leftist crusades, back in the day dropping $100,000 into the Democratic super PAC Friends of Democracy to flip the House in 2013, and backing endless progressive PACs that flood the zone with anti-Trump venom. Then there's Jonathan's sisters, Andrea Soros Columbell, another board puppet at OSF, who shoveled $1.25 million to Planned Parenthood's abortion lobby in 2016 and thousands to Move On's election meddling machine, while even the quieter ones like Candace Soros wait in the wings. This Soros dynasty isn't just funding chaos, they're breeding it, infiltrating every corner of the swamp to keep America on its knees. There is a stark, cold water tossed in your face reason why Russia, Belarus, Hungary, Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan have banned Open Society Foundation activities in their countries. Yet Congress, feeding at the trough, while it's fat, just treat it as business as usual, ignoring at the risk of treason that George Soros has been a sick and twisted version of Galactus, feeding and meddling in the affairs of one country after another to feed his evil appetite and appease his demonic globalist allies. And the United States of America is the main course, of course. Now President Trump has had enough of this globalist meddling, and he's bringing the hammer down. On September 25th, 2025, he unleashed a presidential memorandum ordering the FBI, the DOJ, and the Treasury to rip apart Soros's, quote, domestic terrorism networks, end quote, like a wolf tearing into prey. Trump is calling for RICO charges, branding the Soros clan as kingpins of organized chaos, with the Justice Department already mobilizing U.S. attorneys to hunt down evidence of their funding of violence and subversion. Jonathan's PAC payoffs, Andrea's abortion cash drops, the whole rotten brood under the microscope. And, of course, not to be left out, Alex Soros, the heir to this empire of anarchy, had the gall to vow defiance at a swanky Manhattan panel, but the walls are closing in.
And one man, Donald Trump, literally came in and just took that all away. But when I see this, when I look at this, more globally regarding democracy, I also say to myself, when was this great time that everybody got along so well and, things were going so great? I mean, I think,
this is not just a story about violence and chaos, as you alluded to, Mr. President. This is a money story. And at the Government Accountability Institute, my colleague and I, Peter Schweitzer and our team, we followed the money, and we followed it to the top of what we call the protest industrial complex, Riot Inc., and we found a network of NGOs. It's not just the Soros network, the Open Society network, it's other funding networks, the Arabella funding network, the Tides funding network, Neville Roy Singham and his network, Foreign Cash. And it's also big left-wing funders. Some of them are not citizens of this country. Mr. Hans-Jörg Wyss of Switzerland. They're pouring money into this entire ecosystem. And so I want to share 3 money facts with you about what we call Riot Inc. Number one, like any corporation, Riot Inc. has many divisions. It doesn't just have the Antifa boots-on-the-ground division. It has PR divisions. It has marketing divisions. It has a very well-funded legal division to get these boots on the ground back on the streets as quickly as possible. But it does have those investors that I mentioned. Number 2, we have identified dozens of radical organizations, not just the decentralized Antifa organizations, but dozens of radical organizations that have received more than $100 million from the Riot Inc. investors. These would be the lawyer groups. These would be the groups that advocate for calling good, honest Americans fascists, etc. And then 3, I think the most shocking thing is that we have found that more than $100 million in U.S. taxpayer funding has flowed into these funding networks, including at least $4 million to these very groups themselves, not just Antifa types, but there was an event in Atlanta called Stop Cop City. Over 60 rioters were charged with domestic terrorism. These groups received money for that from both the billionaire class as well as taxpayer money. So one other thing, this money helps fund the decentralized crowdfunding platforms. These are ways that Antifa, the John Brown Gun Club of Elm Fork, which had links to that attack on the ICE facility, the Socialist Rifle Association, and just because they don't have LLCs or EIN numbers doesn't mean they can't get paid. Some of these funding platforms, crowdfunding platforms, are funded by this network that we call rioting. So, again, I want to thank you for your leadership, for the whole cabinet's leadership on this. We're going to keep following the money and appreciate everything you're doing, sir.
Do you know the name of any of the funders? Do you know the names? Because if you do, I'd like you to give them to Cash or Pam.
Absolutely.
Or Christy.
Yeah, we'll do that.
As soon as you can. That's all of you. Because you probably know the names after a certain period of time. You tend to find out. But these are people that do not have good intention for the country, and that's treasonous probably. So if you could, very important, if you could do that, it would be great. Nobody would know better than you. You'll figure it out.
The left's screaming about free speech and authoritarianism, with groups like the ACLU whining about chill donations. But this isn't about politics. It's about canceling the weather underground on testosterone and steroids. It's about stopping a cabal that's been bleeding America dry for over 30 years. Evil scumbags altering the course of American providence and wasting everyone's precious time with their ignorance, arrogance, and insanity. The clock's ticking, and Trump's probe will face internal subversion from every direction as 3 years ticks away. And the deeper they go, of course, the funding allegations will face scrutiny and propaganda. Fact-checkers like Snopes debunk direct Soros Antifa payments, but tax leaks and indictments substantiate indirect trails through intermediaries like the Tides Foundation and Arabella. And we are all currently witnessing that playbook in action as a similar diversion by the Democrats claim that the government isn't shut down over indirect funding of healthcare to illegals, even though it's right there in the bill. These fools think that playing musical chairs will throw America off their stench. Basically, they think you're stupid. But everybody knows the awful truth. It's in the damn CR. Then there is the constant hand-wringing over Antifa's lack of structure that obscures its size, and DSA CPUSA figures rely on self-reports, with many members inactive. Overlapping complicates the totals, but the overall scale remains small. The groups, quote, terrifying, end quote, America, are in the ballpark of roughly under, well, anywhere between 100,000 to 150,000 if you get them all together in a cold and dank federal prison, which I hope we do. The days of McCarthyism may be upon us again, but this time it's welcome. And it isn't just a handful of intellectuals with too much time on their hands that the Trump administration is going after. The Communist Control Act of 1954, a Cold War relic signed into law to crush the Red Menace, declared the Communist Party a clear and present danger to America back in the day, stripping it of legal rights and banning its members from holding office or jobs tied to national security. This wasn't a slap on the wrist. Back then, politicians didn't mess around. The Communist Control Act was a full-on assault to root out Marxist infiltrators plotting to overthrow the Republic with their collectivist poison, and now we're drowning in these fools. Today, as globalist vipers like George Soros and his Open Society Foundations bankroll chaos under the guise of progress, whispers in D.C. suggest dusting off this act, the Communist Control Act from 1954, to slam the hammer down on their shadowy networks. With Trump's DOJ already sniffing around Soros' empire for RICO violations, the Communist Control Act could be weaponized to label his radical-funded groups as communist fronts, choking their cash flow and exposing their anti-American agenda. Yeah, the left will scream McCarthyism, but they don't even have a leg to stand on anymore. And it's never been more obvious than it is now that this is the last stand to save the nation from a creeping red tide. Please subscribe to the Bound Report on Substack and or engage with me on X at Newsbound. John Bound reporting.